by the side of the temple, the right hands and arms of the slaughtered prisoners are cut off and tossed on high into the air. Then the other victims are slain, and those who have offered the sacrifice depart, leaving the hands and arms where they may chance to have fallen, and the bodies also separate. Such are the observances of the Scythians with respect to sacrifice. They never use swine for the purpose, nor indeed is it their wont to breed them in any part of their country. In what concerns war, their customs are the following. The Scythian soldier drinks the blood of the first man he overthrows in battle. Whatever number he slays, he cuts off all their heads and carries them to the king. Since he's thus entitled to a share of the booty, whereto he forfeits all claim if he doesn't produce a head. In order to strip the skull of its covering, he makes a cut round the head above the ears, and laying hold of the scalp, shakes the skull out. Then with the rib of an ox he scrapes the scalp clean of flesh, and softening it by rubbing between the hands, uses it thenceforth as a napkin. The Scyth is proud of these scalps, and hangs them from his bridle rein. The greater the number of such napkins that a man can show, the more highly is he esteemed among them. Many make themselves cloaks like the capotes of our peasants by sewing a quantity of these scalps together. Others flay the right arms of their dead enemies and make off the skin, which is stripped off with the nails hanging to it, a covering for their quivers. Now the skin of a man is thick and glossy, and would in whiteness surpass almost all other hides. Some even flay the entire body of their enemy, and stretching it upon a frame, carry it about with them wherever they ride. Such are the Scythian customs with respect to scalps and skins. The skulls of their enemies, not indeed of all, but of those whom they most detest, they treat as follows. Having sawn off the portion below the eyebrows and cleaned out the inside, they cover the outside with leather. When a man is poor, this is all that he does, but if he's rich, he also lines the inside with gold. In either case, the skull is used as a drinking cup. They do the same with the skulls of their own kith and kin, if they've been at feud with them and have vanquished them in the presence of the king. When strangers whom they deem of any account come to visit them, these skulls are handed round, and the host tells how that these were his relations who made war upon him, and how that he got the better of them, all this being looked upon as proof of bravery. Once a year, the governor of each district at a set place in his own province mingles a bowl of wine, of which all Scythians have a right to drink by whom foes have been slain, while they who've slain no enemy are not allowed to taste of the bowl, but sit aloof in disgrace. No greater shame than this can happen to them. Such as have slain a very large number of foes have 2 cups instead of 1, and drink from both. Scythia has an abundance of soothsayers, who foretell the future by means of a number of willow wands. A large bundle of these wands is brought and laid on the ground. The soothsayer unties the bundle and places each wand by itself, at the same time uttering his prophecy. Then, while he's still speaking, he gathers the rods together again and makes them up once more into a bundle. This mode of divination is of home growth in Scythia. The Enaries, or women-like men, have another method, which they say Aphrodite taught them. It's done with the inner bark of the linden tree. They take a piece of this bark, and splitting it into 3 strips, keep twining the strips about their fingers, and untwining them while they prophesy. Whenever the Scythian king falls sick, he sends for the 3 soothsayers of the most renown at the time, who come and make trial of their art in the mode above described. Generally they say that the king is ill because such or such a person, mentioning his name, has sworn falsely by the royal hearth. This is the usual oath among the Scythians when they wish to swear with very great solemnity. Then the man accused of having forsworn himself is arrested and brought before the king. The soothsayers tell him that by their art it's clear he has sworn a false oath by the royal hearth, and so caused the illness of the king. He denies the charge, protests that he has sworn no false oath, and loudly complains of the wrong done to him. Upon this the king sends for 6 new soothsayers, who try the matter by soothsaying. They too find the man guilty of the offence. Straightway he's beheaded by those who first accused him, and his goods are parted among them. If, on the contrary, they acquit him, other soothsayers, and again others, are sent for to try the case. Should the greater number decide in favour of the man's innocence, then they who first accused him forfeit their lives. The mode of their execution is the following. A wagon is loaded with brushwood, and oxen are harnessed to it. The soothsayers, with their feet tied together, their hands bound behind their backs and their mouths gagged, are thrust into the midst of the brushwood. Finally the wood is set alight, and the oxen, being startled, are made to rush off with the wagon. It often happens that the oxen and the soothsayers are both consumed together, but sometimes the pole of the wagon is burnt through, and the oxen escape with a scorching. Diviners, lying diviners, they call them, are burnt in the way described, for other causes besides the one here spoken of. When the king puts one of them to death, he takes care not to let any of his sons survive. All the male offspring are slain with the father, only the females being allowed to live. Oaths among the Scyths are accompanied with the following ceremonies. A large earthen bowl is filled with wine, and the parties to the oath, wounding themselves slightly with a knife or an awl, drop some of their blood into the wine. Then they plunge into the mixture a scimitar, some arrows, a battle-axe, and a javelin, all the while repeating prayers. Lastly, the 2 contracting parties drink each a draught from the bowl, as do also the chief men among the followers. The tombs of their kings are in the land of the Geri, who dwell at the point where the Borysthenes is first navigable. Here, when the king dies, they dig a grave which is square in shape and of great size. When it's ready, they take the king's corpse, and having opened the belly and cleaned out the inside, fill the cavity with a preparation of chopped cypress, frankincense, parsley seed, and anise seed, after which they sew up the opening, enclose the body in wax, and placing it on a wagon, carry it about through all the different tribes. On this procession each tribe, when it receives the corpse, imitates the example which is first set by the royal Scythians. Each man chops off a piece of his ear, crops his hair close, and makes a cut all round his arm, lacerates his forehead and his nose, and thrusts an arrow through his left hand. Then they who have the care of the corpse carry it with them to another of the tribes which are under the Scythian rule, followed by those whom they first visited. On completing the circuit of all the tribes under their sway, they find themselves in the country of the Geri, who are the most remote of all, and so they come to the tombs of the kings. There the body of the dead king is laid in the grave prepared for it, stretched upon a mattress. Spears are fixed in the ground on either side of the corpse, and beams stretched across above it to form a roof, which is covered with a thatching of osier twigs. In the open space around the body of the king they bury one of his concubines, first killing her by strangling, and also his cupbearer, his cook, his groom, his lackey, his messenger, some of his horses, firstlings of all his other possessions, and some golden cups, for they use neither silver nor brass. After this they set to work and raise a vast mound above the grave, all of them vying with each other and seeking to make it as tall as possible. When a year is gone by, further ceremonies take place. 50 of the best of the late king's attendants are taken, all native Scythians, for as bought slaves are unknown in the country, the Scythian kings choose any of their subjects that they like to wait on them. 50 of these are taken and strangled. with 50 of the most beautiful horses. When they're dead, their bowels are taken out, and the cavity cleaned, filled full of chaff, and straightway sewn up again. This done, a number of posts are driven into the ground in sets of 2 pairs each, and on every pair half the felly of a wheel is placed archwise. Then strong stakes are run lengthways through the bodies of the horses from tail to neck, and they are mounted up upon the fellies, so that the felly in front supports the shoulders of the horses, while that behind sustains the belly and quarters, the legs dangling in mid-air. Each horse is furnished with a bit and bridle, which latter is stretched out in front of the horse and fastened to a peg. The 50 strangled youths are then mounted severally on the 50 horses. To effect this, a second stake is passed through their bodies along the course of the spine to the neck, the lower end of which projects from the body and is fixed into a socket made in the stake that runs lengthwise down the horse. The 50 riders are thus ranged in a circle round the tomb, and so left. Such then is the mode in which the kings are buried. As for the people, when anyone dies, his nearest of kin lay him upon a wagon, and take him round to all his friends in succession. Each receives them in turn, and entertains them with a banquet, whereat the dead man is served with a portion of all that's set before the others. This is done for 40 days, at the end of which time the burial takes place. After the burial, those engaged in it have to purify themselves, which they do in the following way. First, they well soap and wash their heads. Then, in order to cleanse their bodies, they act as follows. They make a booth by fixing in the ground 3 sticks inclined towards one another, and stretching around them woolen felts, which they arrange so as to fit as close as possible. Inside the booth a dish is placed upon the ground, into which they put a number of red-hot stones, and then add some hemp seed. Hemp grows in Scythia. It's very like flax, only that it's a much coarser and taller plant. Some grows wild about the country, some is produced by cultivation. The Thracians make garments of it, which closely resemble linen, so much so indeed that if a person has never seen hemp, he's sure to think they're linen, and if he has, unless he's very experienced in such matters, he won't know of which material they are. The Scythians, as I said, take some of this hemp seed, and creeping under the felt coverings, throw it upon the red-hot stones. Immediately it smokes, and gives out such a vapour as no Grecian vapour bath can exceed. The Scythes, delighted, shout for joy, and this vapour serves them instead of a water bath, for they never by any chance wash their bodies with water. Their women make a mixture of cypress, cedar, and frankincense wood, which they pound into a paste upon a rough piece of stone, adding a little water to it. With this substance, which is of a thick consistency, they plaster their faces all over, and indeed their whole bodies. A sweet odour is thereby imparted to them, and when they take off the plaster on the day following, their skin is clean and glossy. The Scythians have an extreme hatred of all foreign customs, particularly of those in use among the Greeks, as the instances of Anacharsis and more lately of Scylas have fully shown. The former, after he had travelled over a great portion of the world, and displayed wherever he went many proofs of wisdom, as he sailed through the Hellespont on his return to Scythia, touched at Cyzicus. There he found the inhabitants celebrating with much pomp and magnificence a festival to the mother of the gods, and was himself induced to make a vow to the goddess, whereby he engaged, if he got back safe and sound to his home, that he would give her a festival and a night procession in all respects, like those which he had seen in Cyzicus. When therefore he arrived in Scythia, he betook himself to the district called the Woodland, which lies opposite the course of Achilles, and is covered with trees of all manner of different kinds, and there went through all the sacred rites with the tabor in his hand and the images tied to him. While thus employed, he was noticed by one of the Scythians, who went and told King Scylas what he had seen. Then King Scylas came in person, and when he perceived what Anacharsis was about, he shot at him with an arrow and killed him. To this day, if you ask the Scyths about Anacharsis, they pretend ignorance of him because of his Grecian travels and adoption of the customs of foreigners. I learnt, however, from Timnes, the steward of Areopathes, that Anacharsis was paternal uncle to the Scythian king Edanthyrssus, being the son of Nurus, who was the son of Lycus and the grandson of Spargapathes. If Anacharsis were really of this house, it must have been by his own brother that he was slain, for Edanthyrssus was a son of the Scythians who put Anacharsis to death. I've heard, however, another tale, very different from this, which is told by the Peloponnesians. They say that Anacharsis was sent by the king of the Scyths to make acquaintance with Greece, that he went, and on his return home reported that the Greeks were all occupied in the pursuit of every kind of knowledge except the Lacedaemonians, who, however, alone knew how to converse sensibly. A silly tale, this, which the Greeks have invented for their own amusement. There's no doubt that Anacharsis suffered death in the mode already related on account of his attachment to foreign customs and the intercourse which he held with the Greeks. Scylas, likewise, the son of Areopathes, many years later, met with almost the very same fate. Areopathes, the Scythian king, had several sons, among them this Scylas, who was the child not of a native Scyth, but of a woman of Istria. Bred up by her, Scylas gained an acquaintance with the Greek language and letters. Some time afterwards, Areopathes was treacherously slain by Spargapathes, king of the Agathyrsi, whereupon Scylas succeeded to the throne and married one of his father's wives, a woman named Apoia. This Apoia was a Scythian by birth and had brought Areopathes a son called Oricus. Now, when Scylas found himself king of Scythia, as he disliked the Scythic mode of life and was attached by his bringing up to the manners of the Greeks, he made it his usual practice, whenever he came with his army to the town of the Borysthenites, who, according to their own account, are colonists of the Milesians, he made it his practice, I say, to leave the army before the city, and having entered within the walls by himself, and carefully closed the gates, to exchange his Scythian dress for Grecian garments, and in this attire to walk about the forum without guards or retinue. The Borysthenites kept watch at the gates that no Scythian might see the king thus apparelled. Scylas, meanwhile, lived exactly as the Greeks, and even offered sacrifices to the gods according to the Grecian rites. In this way he would pass a month or more with the Borysthenites, after which he would clothe himself again in his Scythian dress, and so take his departure. This he did repeatedly, and even built himself a house in Borysthenes, and married a wife there, who was a native of the place. But when the time came that was ordained to bring him woe, the occasion of his ruin was the following. He wanted to be initiated in the Dionysiac mysteries, and was on the point of obtaining admission to the rites when a most strange prodigy occurred to him. The house which he possessed, as I mentioned a short time back, in the city of the Borysthenites, a building of great extent, and erected at a vast cost, round which there stood a number of sphinxes and griffins carved in white marble, was struck by lightning from on high, and burnt to the ground. Scylas nevertheless went on and received the initiation. Now the Scythians are wont to reproach the Greeks with their Dionysiac rage, and to say that it isn't reasonable to imagine there is a god who impels men to madness. No sooner, therefore, was Scylas initiated in the Dionysiac mysteries than one of the Borysthenites went and carried the news to the Scythians. "You Scyths laugh at us," he said, "because we rave when the god seizes us. But now our god has seized upon your king, who raves like us and is maddened by the influence. If you think I don't tell you true, come with me and I'll show him to you." The chiefs of the Scythians went with the man accordingly, and the Borysthenite, conducting them into the city, placed them secretly on one of the towers. Presently Scylas passed by with the band of revellers, raving like the rest, and was seen by the watchers. Regarding the matter as a very great misfortune, they instantly departed, and came and told the army what they had witnessed. When therefore Scylas, after leaving Borysthenes, was about returning home, the Scythians broke out into revolt. They put at their head Octomasidas, grandson on the mother's side of Teres. Then Scylas, when he learned the danger with which he was threatened, and the reason of the disturbance, made his escape to Thrace. Octomasidas, discovering whither he had fled, marched after him, and had reached the Ister when he was met by the forces of the Thracians. The two armies were about to engage, but before they joined battle, Sitalces sent a message to Octomasidas to this effect: "Why should there be trial of arms betwixt thee and me? Thou art my own sister's son, and thou hast in thy keeping my brother. Surrender him into my hands, and I will give thy Scylas back to thee. So neither thou nor I will risk our armies." Sitalces sent this message to Octomasidas by a herald, and Octomasidas, with whom a brother of Sitalces had formerly taken refuge, accepted the terms. He surrendered his own uncle to Sitalces, and obtained in exchange his brother Scylas. Sitalces took his brother with him and withdrew, but Octomasidas beheaded Scylas upon the spot. Thus rigidly do the Scythians maintain their own customs, and thus severely do they punish such as adopt foreign usages. What the population of Scythia is, I wasn't able to learn with certainty. The accounts which I received varied from one another. I heard from some that they were very numerous indeed. Others made their numbers but scanty for such a nation as the Scyths. Thus much, however, I witnessed with my own eyes. There is a tract called Exampius between the Borysthenes and the Hypanis. I made some mention of it in a former place, where I spoke of the bitter stream which, rising there, flows into the Hypanis and renders the water of that river undrinkable. Here then stands a brazen bowl, 6 times as big as that at the entrance of the Euxine, which Pausanias, the son of Cleombrotus, set up. Such as have never seen that vessel may understand me better if I say that the Scythian bowl holds with ease 600 amphorae, and is of the thickness of 6 fingers' breadth. The natives gave me the following account of the manner in which it was made. One of their kings, by name Ariantas, wishing to know the number of his subjects, ordered them all to bring him, on pain of death, the point of one of their arrows. They obeyed, and he collected thereby a vast heap of arrowheads, which he resolved to form into a memorial that might go down to posterity. Accordingly, he made of them this bowl, and dedicated it at Exampius. This was all that I could learn concerning the number of the Scythians. The country has no marvels except its rivers, which are larger and more numerous than those of any other land. These and the vastness of the great plain are worthy of note, and one thing besides, which I'm about to mention, they show a footmark of Heracles, impressed on a rock, in shape like the print of a man's foot, but 2 cubits in length. It's in the neighborhood of the Tiras. Having described this, I return to the subject on which I originally proposed to discourse. The preparations of Darius against the Scythians had begun. Messengers had been dispatched on all sides with the king's commands, some being required to furnish troops, others to supply ships, others again to bridge the Thracian Bosphorus. when Artabanus, son of Hystaspes and brother of Darius, entreated the king to desist from his expedition, urging on him the great difficulty of attacking Scythia. Good, however, as the advice of Artabanus was, it failed to persuade Darius. He therefore ceased his reasonings, and Darius, when his preparations were complete, led his army forth from Susa. It was then that a certain Persian by name Oyobazus, the father of 3 sons, all of whom were to accompany the army, came and prayed the king that he would allow one of his sons to remain with him. Darius made answer as if he regarded him in the light of a friend who had urged a moderate request, that he would allow them all to remain. Oyobazus was overjoyed, expecting that all his children would be excused from serving. The king, however, bade his attendants take the 3 sons of Oyobazus, and forthwith put them to death. Thus they were all left behind, but not till they had been deprived of life. When Darius, on his march from Susa, reached the territory of Chalcedon, on the shores of the Bosphorus, where the bridge had been made, he took ship and sailed thence to the Cyanean islands, which according to the Greeks once floated. He took his seat also in the temple, and surveyed the Pontus, which is indeed well worthy of consideration. There is not in the world any other sea so wonderful. It extends in length 11,100 furlongs, and its breadth at the widest part is 3,300. The mouth is but 4 furlongs wide, and this strait, called the Bosphorus, and across which the bridge of Darius had been thrown, is 120 furlongs in length, reaching from the Euxine to the Propontis. The Propontis is 500 furlongs across and 1,400 long. Its waters flow into the Hellespont, the length of which is 400 furlongs, and the width no more than 7. The Hellespont opens into the wide sea called the Aegean. The mode in which these distances have been measured is the following. In a long day, a vessel generally accomplishes about 70,000 fathoms. In the night, 60,000. Now from the mouth of the Pontus to the river Phasis, which is the extreme length of this sea, is a voyage of 9 days and 8 nights, which makes the distance 1,110,000 fathoms, or 11,100 furlongs. Again, from Syndica to Themyscira on the river Thermodon, where the Pontus is wider than at any other place, is a sail of 3 days and 2 nights, which makes 330,000 fathoms, or 3,300 furlongs. Such is the plan on which I have measured the Pontus, the Bosphorus, and the Hellespont, and such is the account which I have to give of them. The Pontus has also a lake belonging to it, not very much inferior to itself in size. The waters of this lake run into the Pontus. It's called the Myotis, and also the mother of the Pontus. Darius, after he had finished his survey, sailed back to the bridge which had been constructed for him by Mandrocles, a Samian. He likewise surveyed the Bosphorus, and erected upon its shores 2 pillars of white marble, whereupon he inscribed the names of all the nations which formed his army, on the one pillar in Greek, on the other in Assyrian characters. Now his army was drawn from all the nations under his sway, and the whole amount, without reckoning the naval forces, was 700,000 men, including cavalry. The fleet consisted of 600 ships. Some time afterwards the Byzantines removed these pillars to their own city, and used them for an altar which they erected to Orthosian Artemis. 1 block remained behind. It lay near the temple of Dionysus at Byzantium, and was covered with Assyrian writing. The spot where Darius bridged the Bosphorus was, I think, but I speak only from conjecture, halfway between the city of Byzantium and the temple at the mouth of the strait. Darius was so pleased with the bridge thrown across the strait by the Samian Mandrocles that he not only bestowed upon him all the customary presents, but gave him 10 of every kind. Mandrocles, by way of offering first fruits from these presents, caused a picture to be painted which he showed the whole of the bridge, with King Darius sitting in a seat of honour and his army engaged in the passage. This painting he dedicated in the temple of Hera at Samos, attaching to it the inscription following: "The fish-fraught Bosphorus bridged to Hera's fane, did Mandrocles this proud memorial